Sometimes relationships are weird, and sometimes in retrospect they just seem plain wrong. Just like in everyday life, fictional romances and relationships can also fall into similar traps of awfulness, and even more so, strangeness. Welcome back, Nerd Squad. Today we'll be counting down our top 10 controversial superhero relationships. And wow, there are a lot in the comics, and they just are a lot in some cases. Let's jump into it. Number 10. Emma Frost and Cyclops. Don't get me wrong, I like this relationship overall in retrospect, but as this unfolded it was pretty controversial. Not even just for fans reading along as this developed, but also in the Marvel universe. Scott and Emma's relationship started as an affair, with him being with Jean at the time. Jean and Scott, however, did end up parting ways after Jean learned that Scott was having a psychic affair with Emma. Even weirder was that sometimes in their sexy mind affair, Emma would basically cosplay as Jean, making herself look just like her for Scott. It was all pretty crazy. Emma and Jean would have a pretty intense fight regarding this whole affair, and even today, having buried the hatchet now, still have their moments of sassy animosity towards one another, but then they also have their moments of supporting one another. It's pretty cute. Number 9. Aunt May and J. Jonah Jameson. This one was more shocking, I suppose, than controversial, but still. There is nothing wrong with Aunt May moving on and finding love, of course, but I don't think that many of us ever suspected that when she did move on, it would be with JJ. And even more shocking was when Peter at one point walked in on them together when they were in bed. Yikes. Also, what a way to find out that your Aunt May is dating someone. That's a way to find that out. And you might be thinking, are either of these characters really heroes, Amanda? Should they really be on this list? Aunt May is definitely one of Peter's heroes, and in the alternate reality of Earth 3123 is a literal hero, with her taking Peter's place as a spider-like super who goes by the name of Spider-Man. And so for that reason, I think we can count Aunt May today. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more controversial superhero romances, I have so many that I want to talk to you about. So please be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Roy Harper and Donna Troy and The Flash. I mean, this was just a really weird time for Wally, and that is likely a big part of what made this love triangle romance so strange. What happened here was that Donna Troy and Wally West ended up together after the main continuity was reset. Wally knew of his past life with Linda and his kids, but his kids were now seemingly gone, with Linda not remembering who he was or their marriage or relationship from the prior continuity. Donna was there to support Wally through this, and the two ended up together. Roy, however, had a crush on Donna and ended up heartbroken as a result. Ouch. And then shortly after, Wally West lost control during Heroes in Crisis, and coincidentally, not even intentionally apparently, killed Roy Harper, among others. It's just a pretty strange scenario, I guess, and a really strange coincidence? Number 7. Madelyne Pryor and Havok. While Maddie is definitely more of a villain and Havok was once a villain himself, currently in the comics, Havok is a hero. So we're gonna count him as a hero for this list, because yeah. And he's trying really hard. Oh, Havok. Everyone go read Hellions, go do it right now. Besides, he's also been a hero in the past as well. So as I said, he is the hero for this relationship point. What was controversial about these two? Well, just about everything. Madelyne Pryor was initially married to Scott Summers, aka Cyclops, Alex's brother. Madelyne was also still married, I believe, when this romance began, and then she ended up turning Havok into kind of her thrall and her Goblin King, or the very least her goblin consort. Remember those matching outfits? Oof, those themselves could be considered controversial to some, I think. Although I definitely love both of those outfits. I love that Havok just had like a matching one to Madelyne Pryor's like goblin queen outfit. It's pretty great. Number 6. Raven and Wallace West. This is a pretty weird one, especially considering Wally West and Raven's history, which we're not going to talk about in this list, but maybe if we do a part 2, I'll talk about that almost romance. Raven and Wallace West were in a romantic relationship, which is pretty weird if you consider the age difference and also just the different stages of life that they're both in. While this relationship seems to have disappeared in current continuity, it is interesting to note that Wallace West is now a sort of student at Teen Titans Academy, while also being a member of one of the teams of the Teen Teen Titans and a teenager. And Raven is back to being her all-around, normal, youthful, though no longer teenage self, with her being one of the faculty at the academy. That means that unless we make some important adjustments for either hero in terms of their ages, their relationship when it did happen was pretty controversial to say the least. I think there was supposed to be kind of an age tweak when that relationship happened, but yeah, if you don't know that, you'd just be like, what's going on? Raven's dating a teenager. What's happening? Number 5. Madelyne Pryor and Cyclops. Madelyne Pryor herself was a clone of Jean Grey, Scott's first love, created by Mr. Sinister, who is obsessed with the Summers family and with creating the perfect mutant, which Madelyne was a part of that plot, but only if she had babies. So already we're not starting from a great place in terms of controversy and weirdness. There's also the fact that Scott himself only really seemed to be interested in Maddie because she so closely resembled Jean, which is also pretty weird. But it's even more strange that no one seemed to think of the two women's similarity as being suspicious and potentially the sign of a major problem, namely that Maddie was a clone of Jean. Needless to say, the relationship didn't end very well, with Jean returning from the seeming dead, having never actually been dead but just in stasis, and Scott ditching his new wife and child to join the former X-Men team, now restyled as X-Factor, the first X-Factor team in fact. Number 4. Supergirl and Comet. Yep, Supergirl once dated her horse, but I guess it was kinda okay because it turned out that he was a real boy in the end. Well, he became one. Or he became a man, really, maybe I should say, who when transformed into a human took the name of Bill Starr, Bronco Bill Starr. It turned out Comet's backstory was actually that he was once part man part horse and lived as a centaur. Even more odd, he also had a brief relationship with Lois Lane at one point, that's another thing that happened. While under his guise as Bill Starr, Comet would also work as a rodeo star and trick rider. I guess it takes being a horse to know how to really ride a horse? Something like that? Number 3. Deathstroke and Terra. I mean, this is definitely a relationship reveal that will leave you reeling, confused, and likely kinda disgusted. Technically, neither Deathstroke or Terra are really considered mainstay heroes, though both have allied themselves with the good guys in the past, and Terra was for a time a seeming hero with the Teen Titans. Although part of her whole reveal as an undercover baddie, as well as part of her relationship with Beast, also led us to the revelation that she and Deathstroke were together. Now, let's keep in mind that Terra is supposed to be a teenager, whereas Slade Wilson is, well, I mean, definitely an older man for sure. His hair is white, he has multiple kids. Yeah, it's just not great. Even worse, there has been added context given to us for this relationship which focuses heavily on the sexual attraction between these two. Just ick. You also have to consider the power dynamics here, with Slade being older and also kind of Terra's boss in her undercover mission. So there's also that power dynamic that is like, just not great. Number 2. Jean Grey and Professor X. This has to be one of the most controversial romances of our time, at least in my mind. Maybe I just read too much X-Men, so that's why this is like really high up for me. Well, they didn't have a romantic relationship. They did have a relationship that had some really weird romantic undertones from pretty much day one. Professor X showed interest in Jean via his thought bubbles, but claimed he could never bring himself to let her know. Not because he was presumably much older and later established to be so, or because he was her teacher and professor at his own self-created school, but because he was the leader of the mutant team and was confined to a wheelchair. And how could he ever burden Jean with that? How could she ever accept that I'm confined to a wheelchair? It just reminds me of Scott. How could she ever accept that I can never take off my glasses? So yeah, just even on the surface, this whole thing is pretty controversial. Then of course there are all the other creepy moments from across the multiverse when it comes to the professor's feelings towards Jean. What I'm saying is, there's just more layers here than I really have time to peel back and discuss, but if you do want me to discuss them, you need to request a top 10 list on all of those creepy Professor X Jean moments, because there's a lot. Number 1. Donna Troy and Terry Long. Donna Troy was only a teenager when she met and fell in love with Terry Long, with him initially being a history professor at the college she also attended. I don't think he was ever explicitly her teacher, but that one degree of separation isn't really enough to keep the ick out of this relationship. Terry perhaps was intended to be a younger professor as well, closer in age to Donna. At one point, I think it's mentioned that he's at least 29, but then there is the fact that he had tenure and was already divorced with a possibly preteen daughter from his previous marriage, Jennifer, who we later see as a teenager. The fact that Terry Long started out as a side character who also looked a lot like Marv Wolfman did at the time, and ended up somehow marrying Donna and constantly fawning over her BFF, model, and fellow teen, Starfire, is all pretty wild, to say the least, when you're looking back. What do you think are the most controversial relationships in comic book history? Which relationships would you like to see showcased on a potential part 2 to this list? Are there comic book relationships that others thought were weird that you thought actually weren't that weird? Let us know in the comments below. And speaking of comments, it's time to turn to some comments from one of our latest videos, Top 10 Most Powerful Alternate Versions of Captain America. Just a peaceful man who's born in the 1980s response, we can't wait to see MCU Sam Wilson, played by Anthony Mackie, doing heroic deeds as the next Captain America, based on the original Marvel comic book version. I also can't wait for that. I'm like so hyped about the next Captain America movie because of that. And many other things, but that's definitely a big highlight for me. Michael Ross comments, of course MCU Captain America is on this list. After all, he was excellently played by Chris Evans. I'm just loving all these like MCU appreciation moments and like shoutouts in these comments. It's made me really happy. Also, you're right, Chris Evans did crush it as Captain America. I really didn't want to like the Captain America movie. I remember when it first came out, and then I saw it and I was like, dang, that was really good though. Made me fall in love with Captain America, and I was just like, oh, so much appreciation. Matthew Morey shares, I like Captain America who helps the Native Americans and fights for equality, as well as against corruption. I believe that's the Captain America we need most now. I totally agree, and I also feel like I haven't read it yet, but there's a new comic that's like the states of Captain America, the United States of Captain America, and I feel like there's going to be a lot of cool stuff in there as well that plays into just like Captain America being a hero for everyone in America, which I think is really important right now. And that's all the time we have for comments today. Be sure to comment below for a chance to have your thoughts and feels shouted out in a future video. This has been Top 10 Nerd, and I'm your host Amanda McKnight, reminding you as always to stay nerdy, YouTube.